Welcome to this explainer, where we're unpacking a massive paradigm shift. For the past couple of years, the whole tech industry has just assumed that real AI has to live in the cloud, right? Running on these giant server farms, hidden behind API calls, and metered by the token. But honestly, recent events are completely tearing that narrative apart. Today, we're diving into how a perfect storm of broken cloud economics, an accidental hardware miracle, and a fiercely independent open source project are literally bringing computing power right back home.
Okay, let's just jump right into this really shocking number, 320%. That is how much enterprise AI bills have surged over just 2 years, even as raw token costs completely plummeted. Crazy, right? The cost per token actually dropped by a factor of 280, yet companies were paying exponentially more. The industry is calling this enterprise bill shock, and it all boils down to agentic AI. When you let AI agents perceive, plan, execute, and evaluate over and over again without a human stepping in, your token consumption doesn't just go up a little bit, it absolutely explodes. To really grasp this huge opportunity, here's our roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll hit the AI token cost crisis. Second, enter the OpenClaw revolution. Third, the Apple Silicon advantage. Fourth, how local AI saves money. And finally, the golden MSP opportunity. We're going to see exactly what broke, the unlikely hero that fixed it, the hardware making it happen, and how businesses are cashing in. All right, Section 1, the AI token cost crisis, and why the economics of AI are fundamentally broken. You know, this inevitable reckoning over token consumption didn't just pop out of nowhere. It was forced on the whole industry. We saw 3 sudden jolts that basically proved unchecked token burn is totally unsustainable. First up, January 2025. A lean startup called DeepSeek drops their R1 reasoning model. They match the performance of the big frontier models, but price their API almost 20 times cheaper than GPT-4o. The market suddenly realizes, wow, raw compute isn't this impenetrable moat after all, and NVIDIA literally loses $600 billion in value in a single day. Then came that enterprise bill shock we just talked about, with average corporate AI budgets ballooning from $1.2 million to $7 million. And finally, the stark reality of provider economics came to light. Companies like OpenAI were losing billions, spending $1.35 just to make a single dollar. The real bottleneck wasn't R&D anymore. It was the crushing daily cost of serving AI at scale. Now, a staggering 85% of enterprise AI spend is going straight to inference. That means the actual day-to-day running of the models. It's not the training phase, it's just executing tasks. Tokens simply cost way too much to process, and they were being sold for way too little. The industry desperately needed a way to stop burning cash just to keep the lights on. So, that brings us to Section 2, enter the OpenClaw revolution, or as I like to think of it, the unlikely hero of local AI. It all starts with this technological white knight that actually began as a single Austrian developer's side project. Towards the end of 2025, Peter Steinberger published a public code repository for a self-hosted AI agent. He originally called it Claudebot, then Moltbot, and then finally landed on OpenClaw. Yep, 3 names in 1 week. But the open source world didn't care about the naming chaos. What really caught fire wasn't just the code itself, but the core idea. An AI agent that doesn't just answer your questions, but actually executes workflows right on your local machine. You interact with it through everyday apps like WhatsApp or Discord, but functionally, it has direct local access to your file system, your browser, your email, your calendar, and the best part, your data stays completely on your own machine. In an era where businesses are terrified of feeding private info into the cloud, this was absolute gold. It actually became the most starred GitHub repository in history, with over 347,000 stars. To really grasp how OpenClaw works under the hood, we first need to talk about what a harness does in the AI world. Normally, a harness is something that sits between you and the language model. It manages the routing, the workflow orchestration, and connects everything to your tools and data sources. Basically, it's the passive scaffolding so you don't have to code API calls from scratch every single time. But here's the crucial distinction. Think of OpenClaw as a harness that actually grew legs. Unlike a passive harness, OpenClaw actively makes its own decisions. It chains steps together autonomously, and it persists memory across your sessions. It leans heavily toward being a full-blown agent runtime. It stores your configuration and history locally, evaluates its own results, and figures out what to do next without having to tap you on the shoulder for permission at every single turn. All right, Section 3, the Apple Silicon Advantage, marking the hardware rebirth. To run all this highly capable local intelligence, enthusiastic techies essentially triggered a nationwide run on a very specific piece of hardware. I mean, if you want GPT-4 level capabilities running on-premise, you can't exactly run it on an old dusty laptop, right?
The market is aggressively shifting toward local inference, and the reasons are pretty obvious when you stack them up. When you rely entirely on cloud AI, you're stuck in a remote queue, constantly hitting API bottlenecks, paying per token, and risking your data privacy. Local inference, on the other hand, puts you back in the driver's seat. Sure, a really complex reasoning task might take a split second longer on your own hardware than on a massive frontier cloud model, but it is predictable, there's absolutely no middleman, and you have total data sovereignty. So how are people doing this? Well, Apple's unified memory architecture accidentally created the single most cost-effective local inference hardware available today, the MacMini M4. By getting rid of the memory boundary between the CPU and the GPU, a MacMini M4 with 64 gigabytes of unified memory can run massive 34 billion parameter models. We're talking highly compressed or quantized models running entirely in memory at very usable speeds. Normally, to get that kind of performance, you'd be looking at a multi-GPU setup from NVIDIA, costing $5 to $10 grand. Instead, you're getting it in a tiny little box that costs between $600 and $800. It's a frankly absurd value proposition, which is exactly why these Mac Minis completely sold out nationwide.
And the message coming out of Cupertino is profound. In September 2026, John Ternus replaces Tim Cook as Apple CEO. Remember, Tim Cook was the ultimate master of supply chain operations. But Ternus? He's the hardware engineer who actually oversaw the Apple Silicon program, making all this local AI possible. Apple might have stumbled into being the ultimate AI inference hardware company, but putting Ternus at the top proves they are leaning hard into this local computing positioning. They fully intend to own it.
Moving right along to Section 4, how local AI saves money, or fixing the token burn. Let's really get into the weeds here and see exactly how moving inference locally stops the bleeding on those enterprise AI budgets. We know cloud tokens are expensive, so how does shoving a Mac Mini under a desk actually fix the math? The crucial takeaway here is that you're still calling a large language model, sure, but OpenClaw significantly slashes your consumption. It calls the model way less often, uses much leaner prompts, and only does it when absolutely necessary. Think about it. When you use ChatGPT or Claude in the cloud, you're sending this massive context window, your history, system prompts, safety layers, every single time. And you're paying for all of it. OpenClaw stores your memory locally, so it only fetches exactly what it needs. Plus, if you ask it to do a super basic task, like running a shell command or just checking a file, OpenClaw's smart routing executes it locally without even touching the expensive cloud AI model. It completely removes that middleman overhead. As this whole ecosystem matured, OpenClaw's runaway success totally defined the category, and it immediately sparked a multi-billion-dollar wave of spin-offs. The original OpenClaw became pretty massive. We're talking over 400,000 lines of code. So naturally, competitors rushed in to optimize it. You had projects like Nanobot and PicoClaw stripping it down to a tiny, minimalist footprint. Then came NanoClaw, which took a security-first approach by forcing the AI into isolated system containers so it couldn't mess with the host machine. We even saw hardware-specific forks like NemoClaw, built strictly for NVIDIA rigs. And over in the enterprise space, Meta swooped in and acquired Manus for a cool $2 billion just to handle long-horizon tasks. Meanwhile, the core OpenClaw project was evolving fast. By early 2026, its creator, Peter Steinberger, was personally hemorrhaging up to $20,000 a month just to keep the lights on for the project. The guy actually found himself in a lively WhatsApp debate between Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg over which models were better. He eventually accepted an offer to join OpenAI to build out their agent future. But here's the brilliant part. OpenClaw wasn't acquired. Instead, it transitioned into an independent open-source foundation, backed by massive engineering support from heavyweights like Microsoft, NVIDIA, Red Hat, and ByteDance. It grew from a quirky personal itch into rock-solid industry infrastructure.
And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, the golden MSP opportunity, or the hero's return. All of this wild hardware and software evolution points straight to a massive, triumphant return for managed service providers. For years, MSPs have been terrified that the cloud was eating their lunch and stripping away their core value proposition as hardware sales dried up. But ironically, the brutal economics of AI are driving the servers right back onto the customer's premises.
Right now, MSPs have the chance to architect these beautiful hybrid systems. You can offload roughly 80% of a client's simple, everyday tasks to virtually free local hardware and save the expensive cloud APIs for that 20% of heavy, complex reasoning. Because OpenClaw is model agnostic, it basically acts as an intelligent traffic cop for your workflow. It routes the lightweight stuff to the local MacMini and only pings the pricey cloud models when it actually needs serious logical horsepower. MSPs get to design, deploy, and manage this incredibly efficient system.
And we can't overstate the privacy angle here. Because the client's data never actually leaves their local network, you are instantly solving the single biggest security headache facing the enterprise today. Think about highly regulated industries. Lawyers, doctors, financial advisors. They all desperately want the power of AI, but they legally cannot just paste sensitive client data into a public cloud window. Setting up local AI infrastructure completely neutralizes that objection. It's the ultimate door opener. Selling on-premise AI infrastructure is a huge step up from just showing a client how to log in to ChatGPT. It transforms an IT provider from a basic software reseller into a truly vital infrastructure partner. You're provisioning the hardware, you're clustering the MacMinis together, you're managing the OpenClaw instances, and you're monitoring the security boundaries. And for an MSP, that translates directly into sticky, highly differentiated, and real recurring revenue. The era of cloud-only intelligence is permanently shattered. The real intelligence is moving to the edge, sitting quietly and securely right under your desk, powered by breakthrough hardware and just relentless open-source innovation. It's no longer just a question of what AI can do for you, but exactly where it's going to do it. So the final question you really need to ask yourself today is simply this. Are you ready to architect that future and bring AI back home?